Hello everyone, bonjour. I am Sam Bhalesar, your Ontario Liberal candidate for this beautiful riding of Ottawa West, Nepean. This community means a great deal to me. It is a compassionate, caring, diverse community, one with a great history and a promising future. Bienvenue, je suis ravie de vous avoir ici. I am honored to have so many of my fellow candidates running for the Ontario Liberal Party under Steven Del Duca's leadership here with us today. We have Tyler Watt, Nepean, Lucille Couillard, Ottawa Vanier, Katie Gibbs, Ottawa Centre, Tom Dawson, Carleton, Shabazz Syed, Carleton, Canada Carleton, and Stephen Blais, Orleans. I'd like to introduce someone who is no stranger to this group. First elected as leader in March 2020, Steven has been working relentlessly these past 2 years on issues that are most important to us and has recruited amazing candidates across the province to reflect his priorities and showcase the diversity that exists in Ontario. Please help me welcome our leader and the next Premier of Ontario, Steven Del Duca.
Well, bonjour tout le monde. I'm delighted to be here today, to be back in Ottawa alongside my beautiful wife, Utilia, and of course the outstanding Ontario Liberal team of candidates who are running here in this incredible community. I want to begin by thanking Sam Bhalesar, who I know is hosting us here today in Ottawa West, Nepean. I've known Sam for some time. I know how hard she and the rest of our Ottawa area candidates are working, and Sam, I know because of your hard work and because of your dedication that you will be an extraordinary MPP for this community at Queen's Park, as will all of the other women and men who are here, women and men who are running right across this province, because together we believe passionately in delivering progress for the people that we are working very, very hard to represent. Now, I'm delighted to be back in Ottawa. You know, I had the chance many years ago to live in this community for a couple of years. And of course, through work and with family, I've been back and forth to Ottawa many, many times over the years. And I know, of course, that right across Ontario, the past 2 years have been exceptionally difficult with COVID. But I also know here in our country's capital city that it's been particularly trying, especially over the last number of months. And before I get into the specifics of today's announcement, I just wanted you to know, the women and men who live right across this entire region, that in me and in Ontario Liberals, you will have a strong partner at Queen's Park who, in good times and times that are more of a struggle, will always stand shoulder to shoulder with you and will never, ever abandon you in your time of need. And I think that is so, so important given what the families and the small business owners here in Ottawa have had to go through over the past number of months. And of course, over the last few days since this election campaign began officially, Ontario Liberals have been talking an awful lot about something that's so important to me and important to my wife and our family. You know, I'm very fond of reminding people everywhere I go that we are raising 2 young daughters. Our older daughter is in grade 9 and our younger daughter is in grade 5. Both attend publicly funded schools in our home community of Vaughan, just on the edge of Toronto. And so what families here in Ottawa and across Ontario have gone through these past couple of years, what some of the families I just had the chance to speak with have gone through with respect to, prior to the pandemic, the Ford Conservatives cutting and undermining and disrespecting public education, to what we witnessed throughout the pandemic, where decisions and announcements were being made late in the week on a Friday, making all of us wait till the last possible second until what we would know, what would be happening in our kids' schools. It was a lot to go through, and it wasn't necessary. COVID was always going to be tough, but the decision to underfund, undermine, and disrespect those who work on the front lines of education made a really, really tough set of circumstances that much worse. That needs to change. And an Ontario Liberal government will invest in the right way in publicly funded education. Earlier this week, for example, I announced that if elected, Ontario Liberals would scrap the reckless decision that Doug Ford is determined to proceed with, which is to build Highway 413 just on the edge of Toronto. A $10 billion investment, $10 billion of your money and my money, invested in a highway that we don't need in this province, that will destroy wetlands and farmland in the Greenbelt and save only a very small number of commuters mere seconds on their daily trips. Ontario Liberals instead will cancel that highway, and we will invest that $10 billion in repairing and building new schools here in Ottawa West Nepean, right across Ottawa and across Ontario. I also announced that if elected, we would be hiring up 10,000 new teachers in this province for our public school system. 10,000 teachers who would help us put a hard cap on elementary and secondary schools in the classrooms of 20. And that's so important when you consider how much education and learning recovery is required in the aftermath of COVID, so that our teachers can actually teach and reach the kids instead of what they've had to do over the past 4 years under the Ford Conservatives. I announced that we would scrap the mandatory online courses. We learned during COVID that forcing kids to learn through a screen is not ideal, that in-person learning is the very best and it's what our kids deserve. But for some strange reason, it's actually not a strange reason. It's because, as I said, the Ford Conservatives don't accept that public education is a core responsibility. Just this past February, just a few months ago, they released another memo to school boards saying that they will proceed with mandatory online courses. Ontario Liberals, if elected, will change that. We will once again make those online courses voluntary for the kids who want to take them. And I think it was yesterday, I announced that if elected, Ontario Liberals would bring back an optional grade 13 here in this province. Optional, structured, properly funded, so that our kids over the next 4 years, the kids who are in high school, who are not quite ready to take that next step in their personal journey, they're not quite ready to go to college or university or take up a trade or pursue some other career path because they've had a serious learning gap, because, again, they need a little bit of extra instruction. And again, in a structured way, we would bring back an optional grade 13. But today I'm here standing alongside all of these incredible candidates to talk about how important it is as we head towards the next school year to make sure that all of our kids and our frontline education workers are healthy and safe at all times, to make sure that we are listening to the very best medical advice, which is what Ontario Liberals have done throughout this COVID journey. What we've always urged Doug Ford to do as well, to listen to the science table, to listen to the incredible people that we have working on the front lines, nurses like Tyler Watt, nurses, doctors, and so many others who have the expertise and have been giving advice to this government from day one, advice that far too often Doug Ford ignored. So today I'm here to announce that if elected, Ontario Liberals will make the COVID-19 vaccine for kids part of the universal roster of vaccines that are required for kids to attend publicly funded schools right across the province of Ontario. Now, some of you will know, I know that I can certainly remember the yellow card that had the list of the vaccines that I received. My wife and I were talking about this as we drove here today. We still have, of course, the yellow cards of our daughters, their immunization record. The legislation known as the Immunization of the Schools Pupils Act was introduced and passed back in 1990, a number of years ago, and there are 9 existing vaccines in that roster of universal required vaccines. As I said, we will add the COVID-19 vaccine to that list. And we're going to do that because the science is settled on this. We know that vaccines help our kids. And we also know that in the youngest category, the kids who are ages 5 to 11 in this province, that as we stand here today, only about 40% of those eligible kids have received both doses of their vaccine. We know, depending on where you are in the province, that there are many kids who are still not attending schools for a variety of reasons, including COVID. We want to change that. We want to set up our kids for success. It's why we're going to shrink classrooms and put a hard cap of 20 on our class sizes. It's why we're going to invest in 5,000 new special education professionals in schools right across Ontario. It's why we're going to hire up 1,000 new mental health professionals in schools across this city and across Ontario, because we know our kids have suffered. Their mental health care has suffered with the isolation and being away from their friends for far too long. It's why we're going to bring back an optional grade 13. And it's why we are going to cancel Highway 413, sitting right above Toronto, where Doug Ford seems to be obsessed with destroying farmland, destroying wetlands, paving over the green belt, just to make some of the richest friends of his even richer. We will not do that. An Ontario Liberal government will take that money. It is the money that you earned. It's the money that you earned that should be invested in your kids' and grandkids' schools, in your community. And that's what we're going to do by making sure that the windows in our classrooms can open and close, that the air is safe for our kids to breathe and the water is safe for them to drink, and that we're going to start renovating and repairing ventilation systems in our schools within 100 days of taking office. This is a comprehensive plan to rebuild publicly funded education in a way that will set our kids up for success, that will respect our frontline educators, our teachers, our principals, our early childhood educators, our school bus drivers, our administrative staff, all of them. This is a responsible, competent plan that Ontario Liberals are determined to deliver on. Because let me just say, education policy and getting it right. Remember, publicly funded education in this province of ours has always been the great equalizer, the great leveler. It is phenomenally important social policy, but equally, it is important and critical economic policy. Every single dollar that we invest together in publicly funded education returns $1.30 back to our economy. And it sets up our kids, and your kids up for the success that they deserve, up for the opportunity that they need to have access to. And a new Ontario Liberal government, with this team and an incredible team of candidates and talent right across this province, we will deliver on this comprehensive plan. And that is a stark and clear choice. Backwards with the Ford Conservatives undermining and disrespecting public education, or forwards with hope and determination and optimism and a real plan from Ontario Liberals to rebuild publicly funded education. Thank you so much. Be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, everyone. We'll be taking questions from this mic, starting with the folks on site, and then we'll be moving to anyone on the line. If you can just please line up.
Hey, Steven.
Where's the mic? There's the mic. Okay.
So whenever you're asked about the Wynne government, you like to say it's a new team, new leadership, looking forward. Dalton McGuinty is going to be here in a couple hours, a short drive away. I'm told you're not going to be there. Is that on purpose?
No, look, first of all, Dalton McGuinty is such an incredible resident and native of Ottawa, someone who served this community with distinction as an MPP for Ottawa South and, of course, as leader of our party and premier of our province. I understand Dalton is going to be at the Ottawa venue, Lucille Collard's office opening. I'll be off to Kingston when we're done here today. That was part of an itinerary that was set many, many days ago, and I'm looking forward to campaigning with Ted Hsu. But I know that Lucille is going to have a fantastic turnout at her office opening, and she is a great MPP, and she, like the rest, will be elected re-elected come June 2nd. But let me also just take this moment to once again brag a little bit about this team, because I am so proud of the women and men who've stepped forward. And it is a new Ontario Liberal team. You look at our candidates, more than 90% have not served at Queen's Park, have not run for us before in various combinations. There are women and men who have backgrounds in science, on the front lines of education, municipal leaders, small business owners, doctors, principals, teachers. We literally have the exact right mix of talent and energy and dedication. So we don't have to wait 6 months to figure out what to do. We have the plan, parts of which I've been announcing over the last number of days. Obviously, comprehensive education plan, transforming and revolutionizing seniors care, Buck a Ride province-wide, which is going to make life so much more affordable for people right here in Ottawa who take public transit every single day of the week. It's a phenomenal team, it's an outstanding plan, and it is a new forward-looking and hopeful direction for the province of Ontario.
Are we going to see you appear at any point on the campaign trail with Kathleen Wynne or Dalton McGuinty?
So again, I'm very much focused on going to the places where I get the chance to campaign alongside incredible candidates like this one. I suspect that most of you probably know the team works really hard to put together a really fast-paced tour for me, which I'm loving. I'm loving being in different parts of the province. And look, anybody in this province who shares my absolute passion, our absolute passion for progress in education, on the environment, on transit, on economic dignity, on a seniors revolution, no, I'd be delighted to campaign alongside anyone who wants to deliver that kind of progress for Ottawa and that progress for Ontario.
Yeah, hi. You say you require children to have compulsory COVID-19 vaccines, but your release note says that there is a statement of conscience exemption.
There is.
Could you just expand on that? Does that mean that parents would have the option to opt out, and would you consider tightening that up? And also, have you canvassed parents' views on this before presenting this policy?
So I'll answer the second part first. Yes, I have. I've over the last 2 years during COVID, I've had the chance, most of it obviously doing virtual touring or virtual meetings because of the restrictions that were in place. But I've had the chance to talk to, in person and virtually, hundreds, if not now thousands, of moms and dads who have been exceptionally concerned and deeply discouraged by the way that they've seen the Ford Conservatives underfund, undermine, and disrespect public education. I've also had the chance through 6 or 7 different, these have all been virtual, stakeholder or education partner Zoom calls to be able to hear from, I'll call it the ecosystem that we have in publicly funded education in this province. Principals, councils, school boards, teachers federations, early learning and child care advocates. We've had the chance to have many conversations about everything that touches on public education. And let me just say, from parents and their representatives to those who work in public education, the message has been clear. What they are fed up with is a government at Queen's Park that dictates from on high. And by the way, during COVID, normally dictates from on high late on a Friday afternoon when no one has time to be ready for what's coming next. That whipsaw back and forth, that complete chaos that we've seen from the Ford Conservatives in education, in particular for the last 2 years, has got to stop. And by the way, the reason there's been so much chaos is, yes, they underfund, undermine, and disrespect education. It's what Conservatives do. But it's also that they have no plan. There is no coherent plan that comes from the Ford Conservatives on anything. By the way, they just released a budget a few days ago. There's no plan in that budget. So we have a plan. It is comprehensive. Yes, I've spoken with parents. And on the issues relating to potential exemptions, we would treat the COVID-19 vaccine by putting it into the legislation known as ISPA, exactly the way the other 9 universal vaccines are treated on that roster, which is that, yes, there are ways for parents, either for purposes of conscience or reasons of conscience or medical exemptions, to seek those, but it would be treated no differently than, for example, the vaccine for polio or whooping cough or the others that are on that list, that roster of 9 already.
On another subject, your environmental platform promises to transition as quickly as possible to a fully clean energy supply.
Yes.
Could you expand on what that means? And is there any concern that, from local people, that this could lead to skyrocketing hydro bills?
No, I don't anticipate, in fact, I don't believe that our plan will. What we know is because the Ford Conservatives have no plan, they certainly have no plan to help Ontario continue on the path of having a clean energy system. We see, because of their lack of a plan and frankly their lack of a commitment on the climate fight and on the environment, that if they were to get reelected, we anticipate that Ontario would end up seeing 600% increase in greenhouse gas emissions coming from electricity generation, mostly from an expansion of gas plants. We see that right now because we know that, for example, the Pickering nuclear facility is coming offline in 2025. There is no plan from Doug Ford to deal with this exact problem. In our plan, which we released a number of days ago on the environment, we would transition, making sure that Ontarians had the energy supply that we need by pursuing a conservation first policy. We would be phasing out the reliance for baseload power on gas plants. We would be looking at all of the options. We have new technology in this province called small modular reactors, small modular nuclear reactors. We'd be looking at renewables, which we've done in the past. We in this province have had an exceptional track record under Liberal governments to actually remove burning coal to produce our electricity. The only reason that we're in the tough spot we are on this particular issue right now is because, first of all, Doug Ford doesn't believe the climate science. Second of all, he's dragged us backwards on a clean environment. And thirdly, he has no plan to deal with Ontario's energy needs in a clean and sustainable way. Ontario Liberals have a plan that will provide the generation that we need, the electricity generation, but do it in a way that's clean, green, and sustainable.
Hello, good morning. It's Joanne Canello at CBC Ottawa.
Hey, Joanne.
Mr. Del Duca, I think earlier you were referring to the protests that Ottawa has experienced in February, and then a smaller one, the motorcycle protest.
Right.
What would, if you had been the Premier, what would you have done differently?
I would have shown up. In fact, I did show up as leader of the Ontario Liberal Party. I was the first of the four main political leaders in this province who came to this community. I had the chance with Katie Gibbs to sit down with affected small business owners in Ottawa Centre to hear from, frankly, restaurant owners who broke down in tears because I know you all recall this, we were just at the point where some of the restrictions were being lifted, and these small business owners, these restaurant owners, and others, not just restaurant owners, weren't able to actually participate in those reopenings because of the illegal occupation that was happening here. And what did we see from Doug Ford? In that moment when this community needed real leadership, Doug Ford didn't show up. In fact, he put out, from what I recall, in the first 24, 48 hours after the occupation kind of began, when we saw some of the most egregious behavior, the defiling of statues like the, Terry Fox's statue and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, we saw tweets from Doug Ford that in essence gave comfort, from my perspective, to some of the people that were participating in that occupation. And then, frankly, a number of days later, long after a premier should have shown up, I mean, Ottawa is Ontario's second largest city. It is in our province. He has a responsibility, a moral obligation to do the job for this community. He chose to go snowmobiling at his cottage. I would show up, and I would make sure that your small business owners and your families in this community had all of the support, financial and otherwise, from Queen's Park that you needed to get through that.
Seeing as we're talking about the occupation, I think a lot of us here, it was eye-opening to see that many people who felt disenfranchised for whatever reason. You yourself say only 40% of younger children are vaccinated, right? For
Fully
whatever
vaccinated.
reason.
Yeah.
Fully vaccinated.
Yeah.
But do you not worry that this new policy will further divide us? Will further disengage those people? I mean, our society is a little bit broken, I think we found from those protests.
Look, I understand the where you're coming from in the question, but let's remember something about, I'll call it the infrastructure around vaccines that was put together in this province once we had vaccines and we started to roll them out. Don't forget, the Ford Conservatives dismantled all of the vaccine infrastructure way, way, way too early, way earlier than an Ontario Liberal government would have. We would have kept it in place. So instead of leaving it people to fend for themselves, we would have been out there promoting, as I have, by the way, as we have, out there promoting that moms and dads do what they can to get their kids vaccinated. So I think back to the Super Bowl. You might remember that Doug Ford took a whole bunch of your money, your tax dollars, and decided that he wanted to do a self-congratulatory ad at the Super Bowl. It's not a cheap ad. I think a real leader in that moment would have used that same money to advertise here in Ottawa and across Ontario to encourage parents to actually get their kids vaccinated. So Doug Ford, in essence, has left the field. And let's not forget, he grudgingly agreed with the idea of a vaccine certificate long after we called for one. He refused to introduce mandatory vaccinations for frontline healthcare and frontline education workers. And then, months before it was safe to even consider it, he announced that he wanted to lift the mandates that were in place and the certificate. All the way through from the very beginning. Doug Ford has been weak on the science. He's been weak on the vaccines. He has tried to cater to fringe elements in his own political base, and that's not right. Because from where we are come June 2nd, there are about 100 days until the next school year begins. And I don't want kids to continue to be at risk, and I don't want frontline education workers to be at risk either. So I want to get that 40% up. Introducing or adding the COVID-19 vaccine to the roster of universal vaccines, which have been in place for decades in this province, is the safe, responsible, and competent thing to do.
But be that as it may, Mr. Del Duca, you yourself said those children who are only 40% fully vaccinated, we don't know why. Maybe it's because their parents are nervous. Like, what are your concerns that this policy is going to further divide people on this question?
I think a lot of parents in this province have seen the current leader of the province effectively wave a white flag of surrender on vaccinations, because Doug Ford from the very beginning has wanted this to be all over. He's wanted to just wave a magic wand and for COVID to be over while he's been plotting his re-election campaign. This man's been campaigning for over a year. He stopped governing. He stopped governing right after he announced that he was going to close playgrounds and then give police more powers to trample on your charter rights with, I'll call them illegal searches at that point in time. That's when he stopped governing. I mean, he wasn't governing well before that, but that's effectively when he handed the reins of his office over to his political team and his pollsters, and that's when he's been doing everything since to try to get reelected, including trying to cater to some of the fringe elements that we have in this province. How else do you explain? I know you've covered politics for a long time. How else do you explain a premier who, when the second largest city in this province is under an illegal occupation, doesn't show up? If there was a natural disaster, wouldn't you expect a premier to show up? If there was some kind of other chaotic event that was making life miserable for Ontario residents, you don't think a premier would normally show up? Why is it only when that particular element in society, which historically has been part of his political coalition, was doing what they were doing in this city, that he chose to go snowmobiling? It's not an accident. He's been weak on this from the very beginning. What we want, is a public education system where our kids and our teachers and our frontline education workers are set up for success because they are safe and they are healthy and the buildings are modern and they're in a state of good repair and the class sizes are small and the kids have the special needs professionals and mental health professionals to do what they deserve to have in this province of ours. And our plan and our team will deliver that, and Doug Ford never will.
Colton Pearl, CTV News. You started today speaking about the feeling of abandonment that some people in Ottawa have had with the current government, but the two announcements that have come so far from your party in Ottawa have done little to speak to the pain points for so many here in Ottawa. We have a downtown where businesses are wondering when people will come back. We have one of the biggest infrastructure projects in the city's history that's under provincial inquiry, people wondering if it will be safe. You know, what is potentially your government doing to answer those pain points? How are they helping local businesses in the downtown core?
Well, look, I said when I was standing here many weeks ago with Katie Gibbs that in that moment when the illegal occupation was still occurring, we said that the province should be at the table with direct financial support for the hardest hit small businesses. The federal government was. But the government of Ontario took forever to announce, and by the way, I don't even know if any of that support's flowed. I don't know if any of that money has flowed. I've talked to small business owners here and across Ontario who've heard nothing but empty words and rhetoric from the Ford Conservatives about financial relief throughout this pandemic, and they've never received it. I think there are many critical infrastructure and transit needs that we have in this province, and certainly here in Ottawa. When we announced our environmental plan a number of days ago, we included in that plan that an Ontario Liberal government would fund and support Stage 3 of Ottawa's regional transit plan, which includes an LRT, of course, an LRT expansion, learning or based on the lessons that we should have learned and will learn through what we've gone through already as a real partner from Queen's Park. But again, I said this just a second ago. I believe that leadership is all about showing up. And when the chips were down here in this community, a community that does have a lot of justifiable and understandable needs, Doug Ford was missing in action.
We've heard a lot about healthcare throughout this campaign, particularly long-term care. Speaking to residents here, that's the biggest question they have. What can we expect significant changes from a Liberal government in the fall?
Yeah, so I announced a number of days ago that if elected, we would deliver what I call a revolution in seniors care. You know, I was blessed in my life to be close to all four of my grandparents, and my mom and dad are in their early 80s now. They both have some health challenges, which a lot of seniors in this province do. But my mom and dad tell me that they want to remain in their own home, the home that they've lived in now for decades. They want to stay in their own home for life, and they want to be safe, and they want to be healthy, and they want to have the dignity that they've earned as they've helped build this province of ours. They should have it. So an Ontario Liberal government will deliver a home care first guarantee. Over 4 years, we will invest $4.4 billion in new money so that 400,000 more seniors can get care at home. And I'm talking about care which could be help with taking a shower or preparing a meal or, frankly, even just a friendly face to have a conversation with. At the same time, we will end for-profit long-term care in this province with a target date of 2028. A target date of 2028. We are going to build more long-term care spaces, 30,000 new spaces, and rehabilitate 28,000 spaces. But there's a big difference between what we will do and what the Ford Conservatives are doing right now. They're doubling down on a broken system. They continue to reward for-profit providers. They have shielded those for-profit providers from legal liability. They reduced inspections. They made a tough situation dramatically worse. Our plan is to create or build 30,000 new spaces, rehab 28,000, so that the long-term care homes that people live in, people like my parents, should they ever need that care, look more like homes not warehouses, not institutions. So smaller groups of seniors, 4, 6, 8 seniors, live together in a place, a home that maybe has a front porch or a back garden. Personal support workers, nurses on site 24/7. That's a vision for seniors care that my parents and the parents and grandparents in this province can count on. And that's what Ontario Liberals will deliver.
Thank you. That's it for the questions on site. We'll be moving to the questions on Zoom. Will?
Okay, to reporters on the line, we're going to take one question, one follow-up, and then if you could lower your hand afterwards and re-raise it if you have a second question, I will re-add you to the queue. The first question is Siobhan Morris from TTV News. Go ahead, Siobhan.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Steven, I'm just wondering, we've heard medical experts talk about, we're not there yet, but that COVID-19 might end up in a place being something like the common cold or the annual influenza routine. So why does this make sense to have a more mandatory approach to COVID-19 vaccination if we don't do it for those other things?
Well, remember, we already do it for nine other conditions or illnesses. I mentioned whooping cough. I mentioned polio. There are others that are on that roster of 9 that exist within the legislation right now. I think that what we've seen over the past 2 years with how much COVID-19 really did ravage so much of what we love in this province, so many people who tragically lost their lives, many others who are still dealing with the effects of what's known as long COVID. The impact that we've seen on quality of life, businesses. I mean, it's just been, it's been brutal over the past couple of years. And I think it's important for us to learn lessons as we go forward about what the best science is telling us. That's why Ontario Liberals believe the COVID-19 vaccine should be added, should become, I believe it would be the 10th on that roster of universal vaccines. I think that would set our kids up for success. I think it would keep our kids healthy. And I'll also mention that, because only 40% of kids age 5 to 11 have both doses of the vaccine, I think it's important for us to get those numbers up, which, by the way, is in keeping or in line with NACI's guidance on vaccines for the kids who are in that age category.
I guess on that double vaccination, we still have a lot of ground to cover to get that 5 to 11 age group fully vaccinated. But going forward, that 2 shots is increasingly going to mean little. We're talking, for seniors now, we're talking about 4 shots. So are you also suggesting at some point down the road moving the goalpost for what you need to have to be considered fully vaccinated?
Again, I think, and I've said this all the way through the pandemic, we will listen to the best medical and scientific advice that we have, and we're blessed in Ontario to have so much expertise. For now, the Ministry of Health's own guidelines say that 2 doses of a recognized COVID-19 vaccine are considered a full vaccination, and that's what we would adhere to for now. But we would stay in touch and take the best medical and scientific advice that we could access in this province to make any changes in the future.
Okay, the next question on the line is from Wyatt Sharp from the Wyatt Sharp Show. Go ahead, Wyatt.
Hi, Stephen. Apologize for some of the background noise. But just to start off, I guess just as it relates to the announcement of Ms. Horvath earlier this morning in Bowmanville, she announced that if elected, an Ontario NDP government would give about $7,000 to $11,000 to families to provide energy efficient upgrades to some of their homes. I guess wondering just what you think of that announcement and whether or not an Ontario Liberal government would look at doing something similar, and if so, I guess just how similar to the announcement of Ms. Horvath in Bowmanville this morning.
Well, thanks very much, Tyler. Tyler. Thanks very much, Wyatt. I was thinking of Tyler, who's standing here right beside me. Thanks very much, Wyatt. Always great to hear your voice. Look, when we announced our climate plan a number of days ago, we did include in that plan that if elected, we would deliver on 100,000 grants of up to $3,000 to help families like the families living right here in Ottawa West Nepean with energy retrofits or other things that they might want to do for their homes in order to help make sure that they were doing their part. Everything in our climate plan, by the way, is about empowering Ontario residents to do their part. Everywhere I go in this province, people tell me they understand the significance, the seriousness of the climate crisis. They want a strong and healthy natural environment. They want wetlands protected, green space enhanced. But they want a government that will partner with them and give them the tools so that they can do their part. So $3,000 will be part of our system or part of our plan. 100,000 of those grants that will go out. But I will also point out that our plan on climate would see Ontario's greenhouse gas emissions be brought down to 50% from 2005 levels by 2030, and Ontario would be net zero by 2050. I'll also point out that in each and everything that I've been announcing over the last, well, number of days, I've lost track of how many days now, every single thing that we are announcing is fully costed. The numbers are there for people to see. When we release our entire platform over the next several days, you'll see exactly what the fiscal impact or budgetary impact would be to the province. Look, I think anything that any political leader puts forward to make the environment stronger and healthier, I think is something that deserves us taking a look at it. But I would also say, I think when you're running to be premier of this province, it's not good enough to put out plans and ideas without costing or numbers behind them. And to my knowledge, we've not seen any kind of costing or numbers from Ontario's NDP so far.
Okay, and then just as a brief follow-up, I guess, as it relates to the announcement that you've actually made here today, obviously the COVID vaccine for children, children have been eligible for it now for quite some time. So I guess firstly, just what would the process look like for those children who, aren't eligible for an exemption to the vaccine, but for whatever reason still aren't going to get the vaccine? And just how would you go, I guess, about dealing with that? And furthermore, do you think a measure like this would help in the way that it needs to, considering how long the vaccine has now been eligible for children?
Well, the process around any kind of conscientious or religious or medical exemption for COVID-19, for those who'd be seeking it, would be the exact same as the process for an exemption from any of the other 9 vaccines that are currently in the legislation as part of the roster of universal vaccines. Look, I think it's also really important to stress that, as I said earlier, because all of the vaccination infrastructure has essentially been removed by the Ford Conservatives, it's become pretty much you're on your own. Fend for yourself, figure it out. And I think that was a really bad mistake on their part. I think they should be using the government's resources like they haven't up until now. Instead of patting themselves on the back with self-congratulatory advertising, I mentioned the Super Bowl example earlier, I think they could be investing some of that money and getting a positive message out to boost confidence and build awareness for moms and dads about the safety of the vaccine and why it's so important for our youngest kids who are eligible to get it, because the science is settled on this. And that's how I think a responsible government would proceed. That's what an Ontario Liberal government would do.
Okay, and just one last reminder to reporters on the line, if you have any more questions, just raise your hand using the Zoom function. Okay, and that was your last question. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone. Take care.